G'day folks, Mark here again. I've got a bit of an update on, well, this one's on the E-Petition. It's an E-Petition to put to Parliament to actually say that we would like to get a proper consultation done, proper review done of some upcoming firearms regulations. These are regulations to severely change the rules for what are already law-abiding, registered law-abiding firearms owners of Western Australia. They want to bring a lot of heavy restrictions, including limiting number of guns, limiting how you can use the firearms, changing rules in health checks, in mental health checks, and all sorts of things. I'll put a link down there with a full list of what is written up in that paper. It already gone through the first stage of going to law. It's got a couple more stages to go. And this e-petition is to simply try and say that we need it to have a proper review. There's lots of things that don't make sense. There's lots of things that are overreaches if you go through the rules. The likes of the sort of stuff they're putting out for the gun hating world, they probably seem really fine. But for the fact that this is supposed to be, our government is supposed to be civil servants and doing things of what the people need, what the people request, this is happening in a very different way, where we have essentially the enforcers, the police department, have written up their own rules that they want to do so they can enforce it. So really unconstitutional in that fashion of what they're putting forward. But rather than the semantics of it, this e-petition is simply to try and get to where it needs to be pulled back a page and needs to be reviewed properly as to make sense that it actually is going to do anything constructive in the peril of firearms, you might say, but it's actually just to review it properly. So to do that, they were after signatures to it, and they had a target of 30,000, which is a decent sort of number. That would make it the biggest petition of its kind to have that sort of number of signatures attached to it. And as that e-petition is going to be due on Monday, that's when the tally would be taking up, and today is Saturday, and it already has over 31,000 signatures to it. So well done, it's good. It is, from all I understand at least, that's enough. People are already starting to talk. The politicians are starting to realise that this matters. This is going to affect the votes of things we have a general election next year. So at this sort of stage, it's good sort of timing to say, wait a minute, we might be going down the wrong road. Doesn't mean they're going to change their ways by any means. There is some parts of our police minister in particular that is likely to just carry on regardless, but I think there's more and more so he's going to start to get a bit of a smell to him in the fashion of this isn't popular, and this e-petition is really going to show that. So well done, and yes, that's a good thing. Is it how much it is? I don't know. How much it'll actually change? I don't know, but it's certainly a start in the right direction. One of the notes on that e-petition, or what it's about and these new regulations, it's also going along with some of the behaviour of the police department is they're really moving forward like they really think their laws have been written up and they're just going to go straight in. It's just going to happen. So a lot of the things with, obviously we have the voluntary buyback side of things, and there's other stuff that's actually happening. One of them in particular is people, when they go to renew their firearms licence, the police force are encouraging people to go with the new digital licence. Now this is attached to a MyGov ID, and it's really also being pushed by the national Labor government to go with a full digital ID. And so I suppose there's lots of stuff to attach to that if you don't know about the drawbacks of the likes of digital ID. It's sold as a convenient side of things, but it's much more about surveillance and control and all sorts of other stuff that comes with it. I personally will stay away from that sort of stuff as long as I feasibly can. So listen, I don't want to be a conspiracy nut about that side of things, but really the simple thing I'd say at the moment is to understand that it's not compulsory. They're just trying to get people, like they're trying to get people to hand in the guns, they're trying to get people to swap over to the digital license, they're trying to get people to go this. A little bit of the digital license side of things is really ending up with everyone having an individual QR code and being able to then give permission to shoot on properties where you are then designated where you can with the QR code, and really complete control, surveillance, tracking is really the end game of that sort of stuff. And I wouldn't say that there aren't some positives to a system that's easier to use, that there doesn't need to be lots of paperwork and things like that in a system work properly, but the likes of there's definitely a fear of you giving that sort of control to a bunch that are behaving like they are. There's definitely some reservations I'd have with it. So if I have the choice, and if people ask me, then I would stay with the license system you've got at the moment. It's not law. When it becomes law, hey, listen, that's what we've got to deal with then. But while it isn't, then I'd stay clear of it. So there's some things I'd like to address with that 30,000 signatures to go with that. We've got 90,000 registered firearms in Western Australia. We've got a state with 2.6 million people. And as much as this is about firearms reform, it's actually about the government process of not really fitting in a constitutional process. It's really where we have the enforcers writing the legislation that they can enforce. So it's a pretty messy situation we've got going on here. So why isn't there even more signatures attached to that e-petition? I imagine people from the other side of the world thinking that, we do have, like I said, lots of people in this state, and this is a huge state. You want to check us, we've got over 5,000 kilometres from one corner to another corner is how big our state is. So it is a big area. But why aren't there more signatures? Well, there's actually some stories I can go with that. And the real reason is there's fear of retribution. There's fear of persecution by the police to firearms owners. There really is. And that might sound like an overstatement. No, it's not an overstatement. It is a fear. We have developed a culture in Western Australia where the police have been reasonably invasive. The last video I did was talking about the fact that they're actually sending out individual texts to people to get them to try and surrender firearms because they've got this voluntary buyback thing at the moment, so you can surrender them over to it. With a real strategy on us looking at it is that they want firearms off the street, and if they can convince you to give them up with the threat that they might not be legal when the law comes through, then even if the law doesn't actually end up going through, they still got firearms off the street because they threatened you, convinced you, tricked you into selling them. So there's a little bit of that sort of logic going on. But then there's also things. I've got a direct story that I've heard third hand. I didn't hear it from the man himself, but I heard third hand. A guy that has a lot of firearms. He got a lot of firearms, very nice, very valuable firearms, a little bit of a superannuation thing on a different sort of licensing system, probably 15, 20 years ago. Don't know the exact date, even longer, but it was a different licensing thing where you could just buy them on an open license on I think this was a federal license. I won't get into the semantics on that there, but he's got a lot of firearms and loves them. They're all usable, so they're all open license, so he can hunt with them, recreational hunting with them, that sort of stuff he can use them for. The police have been hammering this person and threatening him with probably jail time if he doesn't surrender his firearms. And for those people wondering, well, the gun haters of the world, why wouldn't you just do that? Those sort of people with those sort of collections, and I presume I don't know the person, but some of those firearms are worth $20,000 to $30,000. They might be 30 to 40 years old, but they're very valuable firearms, some of these firearms. And they will give you in the voluntary buyback system, they'll give you $600 for them. So that's a really big concern to have those sort of threats being placed at him. The other things that went on in that conversation, which he repeated, was that the police were saying, listen, we plan, in the next 5 to 10 years, we plan to have all the gun ranges shut down. So not only is in part of what they've put forward is the idea to remove the recreational hunting side of things, to remove that as a genuine reason, but also then to force people into clubs, then to shut the clubs down. That was what these guys actually said. This particular part of the police department, and I'll get back to that, that's something that is very relevant in this conversation, but they're going to have all the gun ranges shut down. They're going to have all the gun shops shut down. I think it's all but a couple were sort of mentioned that situation. But this is, and I suppose that story is to say that's the type of persecution that some people are actually seeing, and some people with stories being shared certainly feeling. I'll touch on, there's some other stuff I want to touch on, but when I talk about the police department, I really want to also say this is not all the police. There are lots of good guys in the police department. There's lots of people that want to be the sheepdog. They want to be the guy that looks after their group. They're responsible citizens that want to do a really good job. So I don't want to pick on all the guys that wear a uniform by any means. There's lots of police officers that are doing a great job. We have local ones ourselves. They're dealing with the drug problems. They're dealing with society in all the bits and pieces and all the good, bad and the ugly that every country town and every city has, that sort of stuff. So they're good guys. So I'm not at all trying to say the police force are the bad guys here. There are some of the hierarchy, one in particular that is definitely part of it, but there is a group, and there's a group called the Firearms Reform group, which some of those aren't even police officers. But that group there are part of, at least, where there's some very bad culture in the police force, and it really comes across like they consider a firearm owner a criminal. They're not looking at turning, in their mind, they wouldn't be turning legal firearm owners into criminals by bringing in a law that means that, okay, now you're a criminal by the nature of we've changed the law. I think they have the perspective where they already think of firearm owners as criminals. I don't know that. That's just a little bit the feeling that goes with it. So it's not all a police force by any means. But let's get back to what's actually happening in this persecution I'm talking about. I also know of the shutting down gun clubs, the shutting down gun ranges, the shutting down of gun shops. That is actually happening. That is in process. There's generally a technicality. You know, I've definitely know of a couple of gun ranges that were shut down. They're in town gun ranges, so they're in basements and in bits and pieces. They're proper gun clubs that's in there. But they got shut down in both cases. I think those were environmental reasons. There was lead in their filters, their cleaning filters, to make sure lead doesn't go out. They had some lead residue in them type thing. But they went in with an environmental test to shut those ranges down. I think they're managing to get their way back around, but to get to where they're open again and doing what they need to do that. But there's that sort of angle at things. There's gun shops that are also suffering where, for whatever reason, a technicality, and I do recall a conversation with someone saying that the police, and I don't know which particular department this was, and I presume it's the Firearm Reform group, but I don't know, went into a place to get all the CCTV footage of the range, of the gun shop, I should say, to see if they could find a spot where there wasn't enough people serving, or like a couple of guys had gone out the back to get something for a customer, and then the shop had too many people in it. They have rules that they must have X amount of people at the counter or in the shop when they've got X amount of customers in there, and to see if they could catch them out to where they'd gone away to where they didn't have enough people, as a way to, and I don't know, really it alludes to a way to shut them down because they'd got them on a technicality. So that sort of stuff is happening. And like I said, when it comes to the individuals, it really comes down to a fair bit of intimidation that's actually happening. There's a lot of tactics that this area of the police force are using, and of course once again for the gun hater world, that, well, okay, you shouldn't have guns anyway, so what are you complaining about it? Listen, wait until it's your turn. This is the nature of civil servants that decide that they should run the country. They know what's best for you, and where else is that going to go? So do understand this is, for people who are taking the point of view that it's just about guns. No, this is much more about, be it a rogue civil servant area or be it bad government, it is a real situation we're moving into. So the last bit I want to go into, which is not about this situation, it's about just some more general information of what the firearms community are dealing with. Couple of things. One is trying to transport stuff in Western Australia. They've really largely shut it down. You can't just send a firearm over east, not in any easy fashion. It's very expensive and very hard to do. It's actually another angle that's been taken where via some of the regulations, and this is attached to some of the freight companies and Australia Post and things like that, where you could do it all legally and nice and straightforward. You sign in the paperwork, you send it off, you do everything completely legally, simply won't let it happen anymore. So that also impacts heavily on the likes of people saying, oh, well, they're doing this, so it'll make the price of second-hand firearms go up. No, it's doing exactly the opposite. So when you've got people like with big collections of really nice firearms that were worth something and still are worth something, this sort of angle is really taken to the point where you're pushing people to where there's some guys that are really staring in the face, losing $200,000. Well, it might be their form of superannuation, might be their collection that is a very important family heirloom, and to actually say that you can't have it anymore because we've made a new set of rules and we'll give you nothing for it, it is daylight robbery, theft, whatever you want to call it, extortion. It's a very nasty place some of these people are put into. And then you want to go on about mental health, checking mental health side of things, of people that you're looking at taking away 200, 100, 250, whatever it is, $1,000 take away from it, and don't think that doesn't stress people by the nature of what the police department, or particular parts of the police department and particular parts of our government are actually doing to them. And the last note, as if that isn't bad enough, I've also heard stories, direct first-hand stories actually in this case, about people trying to sell a firearms accessory business. Now, a business that sells bullets, just not powder, not gunpowder, no gunsmith, no dealer license, nothing required to run this business whatsoever, but just projectiles and scopes and bits and pieces, and trying to sell that sort of business. As to time to see, there's lots of people that wanted to buy it, but with a fair bit of inventory, weren't able to buy it because the banks of Australia, none of them would take it on because it was attached to firearms. Even to the point of changing the business's designation, legally changing it from a firearms business to a sporting goods business, because it doesn't have, although it's to do with firearms, it doesn't sell firearms, it doesn't sell things that go bang at all, it sells components. So legally changing their name to a sporting goods, I've forgotten what the designation was. I think it was other toys and sporting goods or something like that is the legal designation for that. But even when they did that, the banks wouldn't loan money for it to be purchased like a normal business. So I can't help but think that probably comes from bigger entities, the likes of BlackRock or side of things, that there's another set of rules upstairs which are actually stopping that and deliberately fighting the whole worldwide firearms industry. But it is definitely concerning times when that sort of thing's happening around the place. So that's enough doom and gloom. I suppose the positives, the more people know of this sort of stuff, the more this conversation goes around, the more people are talking about it. And I'd love to see the people's faces out in the sun in the politest way we could, but to actually joining together with all the other people that are suffering this sort of stuff, with the shooters, the fishers, the hikers, the farmers, the school parents, whatever it is, all the people that are struggling with what our government is up to in places, get together and do that side of things. And even in the small note, this e-petition at just 30,000 is still enough to say, listen, maybe we should listen. So that does definitely put a smile on your face to know we got there, and that there are people, the likes of the Firearms Community Alliance, the West Australian Firearms Community Alliance, they are doing their best, their doggone best, and that is attached to the likes of the SSAA and other members, other clubs that are, or other sort of groups that are all doing their best. People are starting to wake up, other parties are starting to wake up and realise that, okay, this does matter, this isn't a vote winner as they thought it was, doesn't mean it's stopped by any means, doesn't mean you shouldn't be vigilant. But do keep in mind, we're all in the same boat. You're not being isolated individually, and by standing up and being a little louder and being prepared to have this conversation, you then become part of the masses. A lot harder to pick on the masses for whether it's the police department or the government. When there's a lot of us, there's a loud voice, then it's a lot easier to listen to them and try and work with them than it is to persecute them. Anyway, that's that one for today. Well done for the people who did sign that. And listen, like I said, let's keep the conversation going. It does matter, and it's not just about firearms, it's about a lot more than that. Anyway, thanks for checking in. We'll catch you next time.